Hey everybody, welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on September 25th, 2025. For any NLC webinar first timers in the room, our webinars get their name from the Greek word for learning. And today you're going to learn how to use an Agile framework to write and win more grants. From your instructor, Diane Leonard, who is the president of DH Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services, LLC. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. Thanks so much for joining the webinar today. If you could follow along while I read aloud the disclaimer, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. And one more thing, we do have our copyright infringement law printed here. So this is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Moving forward, if you need to access the recording of today's webinar or you want to see a PDF of the slides, you can find that in the courses section here on the learning platform. I did include a link to today's slides in the chat for you, and it is also in the shared notes section. Moving forward, if you care to join another one of our webinars, I hope you do. You can always just log in now that you're on the learning platform, and you'll click on that green banner to join the webinar just like you did today. We do ask that you try to join with listen-only capabilities if you remember. Just helps to cut down on audio feedback in the recording. And if you hear my voice coming out of an incorrect device, you might have a telephone icon at the bottom of your screen, or yours might actually be a headphone logo. But if you click on that, that will bring up a list of your speaker devices, and you can select the right one if you're trying to use headphones or maybe a Bluetooth speaker or anything like that. We do, of course, want your interaction during today's webinar. We want to hear your questions. We want to know your comments, and we're going to primarily rely on the public chat to do so. If you don't yet have it open, it's up here in the messages panel where you see public chat. If you click there, you can open it up, and then whatever you would like to say to the class, you can type in here where it says send message to public chat, and then you can hit enter or click on the little paper airplane to send it in where everyone can see it. Ask your questions, make your comments, and then if you have any tech support issues that I could help you navigate through, you could send that in as well. In the shared notes section, we have a list of important links. If you did happen to join with your mic on, no worries, you can always mute yourself down here. And if you feel like we missed your question along the way in the public chat, you can always use the hand raise feature to draw attention to it. We'd love you to test out the public chat now, if you wouldn't mind. You could take a moment to introduce yourselves before we get started. You could let us know your name, where you're tuning in from, your work or your role in Indian country. It might have led you to today's webinar. You might be here for personal reasons. And then your tribal affiliation, if you have one. You might be a tribal employee and thus not have affiliation. That is okay too. And just a quick reminder while y'all are typing in the chat and introducing yourselves, try to avoid clicking on this red menu panel all the way to the left-hand side of your screen. Yours might just be the little icons, but just know there's not going to be like a warning message. If you click on something there, it's going to immediately pull you to what you clicked on in the menu. So you can always just rejoin the webinar by clicking on that green banner at the top of your screen, but just want to give you a heads up. There's no warning. If you click on the red menu, it's going to pull you right out. All right, folks, while you're still introducing yourselves, it's with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor, Diane Leonard. And Diane, I have made you presenter now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for how to win more grants using an Agile framework. And I'm super excited for this topic because, well, the reality is I love all things grants. And I recognize some of your names from previous webinars. So hello and good to see you again. Thanks for being with us. For those that I haven't had a chance to be with in a Native Learning Center webinar before, quick intro to why I love all things grants. It's actually that I started my career as a grant maker and thought that was pretty hard. It's like a good kind of hard, but it was really hard because there were always so many great proposals, but never enough dollars to go around. So I've been on the grant seeking side for well more than 20 years. And it was about 10 and a half, almost 11 years ago now, that I said, what is this Agile thing that I'm learning about? What is this that I'm hearing people in other industries talking about? And that's why I became not only a Grant Professional Association approved trainer, but also a registered Scrum trainer and an Agile coach, because the two, for me, made both my professional passions, all things project management and all things grants, make total sense together. And my team and I, well, we haven't looked back since. We don't want to go back to our old way of doing things. So I'm really excited to share this Agile approach, what these values mean, how you can put them into day-to-day practice in your team and your tribal organization. So in our time together today, we've got 90 minutes and I've got so much that we could talk about. So what we're going to focus on is using Agile in order to get a bigger, a higher, an increased output related to our grant writing efforts. We're going to think about how it could actually help our teams be happier, more sustainable. It's actually true. My team measures it. It's not just a great idea, but it's actually true. It is possible. We're going to think about how we can use an Agile approach and some of the different tools and techniques to manage some of the really big grant applications, maybe like even a big federal grant application. And so we'll be talking very tactical suggestions throughout today's session. I do always at the end ask if you have any outstanding questions that we didn't address yet, something you want to get answered before we sign off. But please do not feel like you have to hold your questions till the end. I'm watching the public chat. It is front and center on my screen. I want to answer your questions as they come up, because some of this stuff might sound and feel a little bit different than the way that you're operating in your grant process now. So please, please, please ask questions as we go along in the public chat. Overall today, I'm not proposing that you take each and every tactic that I put forward and that you put them all in place tomorrow, or that you put them all in place on Monday. Absolutely not. That's too much. That's overwhelming. No one's going to be happy. Rather, what my goal is for today, for you, is that you listen to these ideas that are based in Agile values and Agile principles, and you listen for things that sound like what you're already doing. If you find one, that's great. Acknowledge that even without knowing what Agile was, you're already operating in this way. And so that's great. A little pat on the back, a little team high five. What I want you listening for instead then is something new, something different, something you haven't tried before. And at the end of the session, I'm going to ask you to type into the public chat what is one thing, the most important one thing that you want to try doing in your work in the next 2 weeks. I'm not going to ask you if you're going to do all the things. No, I'm not in favor of doing all the things. My goal is for you to listen to these tactics, to these values and principles. Listen for and give yourself credit for the things you're already doing. And then try to identify of the things you're not doing, that you haven't tried, what will be the one that you are most excited to try in the next 2 weeks. That makes sense. All right, so we're not going to do all the things. Too much pressure. We already have plenty of other things to do, right? Lots of grant applications. Speaking of all the things, I'm curious. You've done a great job saying hello and letting us know where you're joining from today in the public chat. How many of you have ever felt pressure, direct or indirect, to get more grant applications out the door this year than what you did last year, or this month versus what you did last month, or this quarter versus what you did last quarter? Can you please let me know in the public chat? Y for yes, S for maybe sometimes, N for no. How many of you have ever felt that pressure that you have to write more grant applications, get more applications out the door? It might not be a constant pressure, but it is one that I hear from grant professional peers frequently. And the reality is that that pressure comes from the shifting and maybe increasing needs in our communities. So that pressure drives us to do one of two things. Spend lots and lots of extra hours, maybe working weekends or taking the laptop on vacation, and trying to get literally more applications out the door without changing anything except for how much time we spend on our computer. The other option, I think, is the one that Agile presents us, looking at the way we are working. How do we work together? What is the way that we do the work itself? How do we iterate? How do we get feedback? And asking ourselves, is there something that we can do differently in order to be more efficient and more effective? We don't want one or the other. We want both. We want to be more efficient and more effective. That will make our grant process more sustainable. So we're going to talk about Agile values today. And we're also going to talk about the principles a little bit, but these 4 Agile values that I'm going to teach you in a minute are going to be the foundation of every technique that I teach you today. So we're going to have a quick little bit of formal definition stuff here. We need to think about what Agile means. I know that some folks might say Agile. Are we talking about like physical agility? Are we talking about like yoga or Pilates? Some of you might have heard of specific types of tools or frameworks. So we're going to quick give you some understanding about that, get some of the jargon out of the way. So Agile, what is it? Could you let me know if you have, before today, how many of you have heard of Agile related to work? Could you let me know in the chat, please? Y for yes, N for no. How many of you have heard the word Agile used in any context as it relates to work? Now, the irony is that I love talking about Agile as an umbrella, and it is currently raining in far, far upstate New York, so it's a good umbrella day. It doesn't matter if you've heard of it before or not. I'm going to give you all the definitions you need today, but I always like to understand if folks have heard of it before or not. Agile is an umbrella term that was first used in workplaces really in 2001. Been a while, hasn't it? Yep, it has. And what it means and why I say it's an umbrella is that it is a set of values and principles that were given a single label of Agile by a group of 11 different professionals that had specific creative ways of approaching teamwork. Not just work that I might individually do or work that you might individually do, but these were 11 individuals who had created basically ways of teams working together. A lot of it does originate in software. And what they said was, we're all pretty awesome, and we came up with really creative ways to help teams work better together faster. What do we all have in common? That is what they were all trying to agree on. And so what happened is that these folks came together in 2001, and they wrote what is known as the Agile Manifesto. I've just put the link for that into the public chat for you. And you'll see that there are a number of individual names on that. There is an image of them all standing around in front of a whiteboard. Actually, they were at a ski resort was where this gathering was held, trying to decide what was the same about the way they worked. And so under that, lots of different frameworks, lots of tools fall under that. Here's what they agreed on together. They agreed that these 4 values were present in all of their unique, distinct, creative ways that they would have teams work together. The way that you read these values is by thinking about the first phrase in the statement. Then there's the red word over. That first phrase is more important in the team setting than the phrase on the right. So in the first value, individuals and interactions are more important in an Agile team setting than the processes or the tools that you might have in place. Oh, trust me, it is not that we can get rid of our processes. It is not that we can get rid of our tools. We still need them. But we should not let the tools nor the processes determine exactly how we're going to work together. We shouldn't let that drive our interaction. Rather, who we are as people should drive our interaction. That is more important. The second value is that working product, so that whatever it is you're developing. In today's conversation, grant applications are draft applications, and the feedback we get and the iterations we go through are more important than having a perfectly beautiful program design document like a logic model. I know you're surprised I would say something like that. I talk about logic models all the time. Perhaps you've even learned how to build them with me. But our working product of the grant application draft is more important, because we're working towards that deadline, than having perfectly polished internal program design documents. The third value, customer collaboration, is more important than contract negotiation. It's not that we get rid of contracts or memorandums of agreement or memorandums of understanding, but rather it's that the collaborations with customers is a big, broad statement here. Rather, it's that customers are stakeholders, are board members, are community members, are much more important to us to keep in mind in our interactions and our collaborations than thinking about what the documents tell us. And our fourth value, this is my favorite if I could have one, is responding to change over following a plan. I'd like for you to please think about the last, well, let's see, it's almost the end of September. It's almost the end of the 9th month in the calendar year. Let's go back to the beginning of January, shall we? And a lot happens in a year. Is there anyone here who has not had something, we're going to go grant related, something grant related that didn't go slightly different than planned? You thought the application was going to open, it opened early. You thought the application was going to open, it opened late. You thought the application was going to have a decision announced in May, and it didn't announce the decisions until June. You maybe had a grant maker call and ask for something that you weren't expecting them to want, and it had a pretty short timeline, something you hadn't planned. I could keep going, but I'm going to leave it at that. I've given a lot of examples for where, as grant professionals, you may have experienced something unexpected. Has that happened to anybody else, or is that just my team? I don't want to make an assumption. Could you let me know in the public chat? Why for yes? Did that happen to anybody else at least once since the beginning of the year, where something has not gone according to your well laid out plan? I saw some quick whys coming into the chat. You're like, yes, Diane, that was kind of rhetorical. That's life in grants, isn't it? But did you know that when you respond to those moments, when you adapt to something that is due earlier than you thought, that got announced for awards later than you thought, whatever it might be, when you react and shuffle your plan, that's actually you living and embodying an agile value. You know that? A lot of folks are like, no, I didn't have any. Yes. So even though you might not have been using the label of agile, you were living the agile value. So for that, I applaud you. A little golf clap there. You, again, without the label, sounds like many of you are already being agile. So what is a little deeper as we think about those values? How do we make those values present in our everyday interaction? I don't know about you, but my writers on my team are spending their days writing and character counting and grammar editing and mock reviewing. We want them doing those real things to get the grant applications out the door. We don't have all sorts of extra time to sit around and do, well, do we have to talk about our values every day, or what does that mean? We don't have to. What happens is that these principles of Agile, they help us think about putting these values into our day-to-day interactions. So the tactics that I'm going to talk about today are all really, they're based in the Agile principles. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize any of them. You can read more at that Agile Manifesto website that I put in the public chat. But these are values and principles that I want to highlight are used literally around the world in industries of all shapes and sizes. This is not unique just to grants. This is not unique to tax-exempt organizations. This is not unique to any one industry. So I actually think that's really cool because it means you can talk about an agile way of working with someone in transportation, with someone doing charity work in the UK. You can literally, you never know, you're on a plane next to someone, you might be at an event in the community, you just never know who you could get to talk to about Agile because it's literally the same set of values and principles regardless of who you are and what type of work you're doing. Now, there is one particular framework that is most commonly found in terms of case studies for NGOs, charities, nonprofit organizations, and the like. And so I do want to just give you a quick introduction to what that is in case you hear it. It's Scrum. Scrum is a specific framework. It's one of the ones that fits under the umbrella of Agile. It is not an acronym. It's not a software that you have to buy. Also, it is not, because a Scrum is the starting formation for rugby. That's also not what we're talking about. Rather, Scrum, it is a specific way of working in a team environment. It is one of the many Agile frameworks. You say you're a Scrum team, it means also that you are embracing and living those Agile values and principles. And the reason that some teams gravitate towards it is that it has a very clear set of rules for how teams interact. It tells teams what their roles are. It tells teams when and how they come together. So that slightly elevated level of prescriptiveness for some teams really helps them operationalize Agile and ensure that they're doing all the things they can to embrace these values and principles in their work. No pressure that you have to worry about Scrum ever after today's conversation. But Agile is the most important thing we're talking about today. Those 4 Agile values. And the reason that these values are so important is that they bring about, I think what most of us want, in teamwork. Think about the best team environment that you've been in. It was not stressful. Things went really smoothly. By working together, it was better. It was faster. You don't have to tell me what team environment it was. It could be in your current workplace. It could be that it was a community committee that you were on. It could have been something 2 or 3 years ago, 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. But when you have those feel-good team moments, the successful ones, usually these 5 words on the screen were present. The team was open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. The team members had courage to have tough conversations. If someone had some candid feedback, they felt comfortable sharing it because they had respect for each other and their great skills that they were bringing to the table. They were all focused on a shared thing, and they were committed to getting it done together. Those 5 words, I think, are another nice representation of what those Agile values can feel like in your team. We're, of course, thinking about grants. And how does Agile help us in grants? Let me tell you a little bit about why I first said, I think I have to try this Agile thing. As the person who was leading my team of writers, I felt like I was always their bottleneck. I always had proposals that they were waiting for me to review so that we could get them out the door. Perhaps this might for you feel like a leader in your organization is you're always waiting for their final review or their approval so you can get something out the door. That's like the equivalent. But that might not actually be your bottleneck or your constraints. That might be something else. You're waiting for approval of a budget, or you're waiting for information about the survey results from the last class you delivered. Something might be a bottleneck for you. Well, in my case, I knew I was the bottleneck. I knew that I was the constraint. And I was trying to think about how could I get rid of that bottleneck? How could I let the work flow? It wasn't a good feeling to be the bottleneck. Hi, I'm Diane and I'm a bottleneck. But I owned it. And so what happened is that I said, I want to try something. I want to try one thing differently. What could I try as a test to make it different? Enter stage right or left, depending on, I guess, how that worked on the screen, this book. From The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. If you can't tell from my little backdrop here, I love books. Love books. And what happened is that my spouse and I were taking a very long road trip from far, far upstate New York down to North Carolina, and we were going to have our 2 small children in the car. And so it was like 14 hours. And we were trying to decide what would we listen to as an audiobook together. An engineer in the car and a grant professional. And the engineer said, I think you got too much to do, too many proposals to write. I think you might like this book. I heard it's pretty good. Okay. I was convinced. And the rest they will say is history. I was absolutely hooked. The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. The subtitle, the publisher, they did their work on this book. For me, that was the moment where I said, okay, I think I can try something different. I didn't know all the Agile values. I didn't know all the Agile principles. I had no idea what tool I might use in order to make this work within my team. Had no idea. And that's okay. Diane, I don't want to read the book. I don't want to worry about a tool. I just want to make grants less stressful. Yes, that was me. And I said, but I just want to try one thing. I want to know if it works or not. So I just want to make one change in my team. Now, these days, a lot of what I hear, because there's lots of cool project management tools that have been grown over the last 11 years since I first read the book. Are any of these tools that you use? If so, go ahead. Let me know in the public chat, please. Have you used any of these tools? Are you using multiple of these tools? Are you using a tool that is like one of these tools, but is not on the list? There's so many. I mean, I could have an entire screen just of all the words, of all the different tools. These are all project management tools. And they're actually more formally known as Agile project management tools. They're tools that help teams visualize their work. Oh, all right. Ooh, lots of exposure. Monday.com, Asana, and Trello. Oh my goodness. Awesome. So even if you've not, and an interesting point, like Office, like Microsoft Office, having the tools that it has actually could be what you use and you never touch any of these external tools. Fair point. There is so much in terms of tech that's available to help us make our work visible. That is really what all of these tools are about. Now, back to me. This is about me, right? It's not. It's about you. But remember my story where I wanted to change one thing. And those tools that were on the market, or that I had on the screen, were not on the market. And I was not interested in some software fix. That's not what I thought was the problem. I'm a human. I was the bottleneck. I didn't think software was going to be my fix. But really, what I was thinking about was what is sustainable? And I was questioning, if I'm a bottleneck, that makes me unhappy. It probably makes my team unhappy. It probably makes them stressed. But their work is sitting there, not moving forward. So what I thought about instead was something different. I thought about what's the visibility of the plan? How do we know how our plan is going to move forward? That's what I was trying to figure out. How did I know how much work we had and where it was going to be in which stage leading up to a deadline? So I came back from reading that book. I'm like, but I can see my grant calendar. I can see it. It's right there. It's on the screen. Well, an old version of it, right? That's not the current one. Or maybe, how many of you say, I have an Excel sheet or I have a Google sheet. I can see my work. I can see the list of things that I said I'm going to do. Does that sound familiar? How many of you have a grant calendar or a grant tracking spreadsheet so that you can see what is your commitment for the year. Could you let me know in the public chat why for yes and for no? Do you have some sort of visual way that you can see your plan? I am tool agnostic in your answer. It doesn't matter if it's a shared Excel sheet, Google sheet, Microsoft Office calendar, Google Calendar, OneNote. Oh, sure, yeah, anything. All of that's fine. Having that is great. But you know what? It's really flat, isn't it? So what this is often called in our field is a grant calendar. So what is a grant calendar? It is the plan for how we're going to raise the money needed for our organization. And it's great to have one. Now, for those of you that said you don't have one, let me get you a quick link to a blog post that our team did about what is a grant calendar. So you can put that in your to read later file and do a little bit of extra homework. But big picture, we have a plan. How are we going to raise the money? So if we have that plan, how can I tell how long something might take? I mean, I know when the deadline is. That's usually what actually is most transparent for us in said plan, on said calendar, in said spreadsheet. It's really hard to think about the overall flow and when something might be ready for review or when something might be ready for a grammar edit or for a mock review. And so I started to play around with how would I make our team's work visible. This is a real image of something that I did back in 2019. See how the stickies are different colors and they're different sizes? Our work as grant professionals are of a varying level of complexity, of externality, of uncertainty. We could say, at a minimum, it's different lengths of words that we have to write. And so I was trying to come up with how could I make it visible to show how different our work is. And everything I was reading was about for-profit. So I'm like, I'm not worried about cars. I'm not worried about scooters. I'm not worried about computers. I'm worried about grant applications. Can you give me an example in the public chat of the largest grant that you've written in the last, we'll say, year or two? It's up to you for how you want to describe what is the largest thing. You could give me the name of a grant. You could tell me how many words. You could tell me how many pages. But could you give me some description about what was the biggest thing that you have done in the last year or two? No right or wrong answer. It doesn't have to be anything that was funded. But what was one of the biggest things that you did? On the screen, the yellow, like the big yellow rectangles and the big orange rectangles, those represented what we thought would be the biggest things for that year. Those on the 12-month plan happened to fall all in July and August. Oh, happy summer. Here, go do the biggest grant applications that you need to do this year in the summer months. Doesn't that sound fun? Ooh, broadband expansion. Oh my gosh, and that's a lot of dollars. Ooh, that's a big way. Big. Not just in what was written, but in dollar value. Yeah, 75 pages. Huge, 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 huge. I'm guessing with a lot of attachments. A federal grant with HUD. Say no more. All the attachments, all the words. Yes, those are examples of things that are huge. But on your calendar, in your digital calendar, or even if you did it like on a wall calendar and you wrote down, or in your Excel spreadsheet, are represented by one line. They all look the same, don't they? I was trying to figure out how can I see where those big things happen. So this is part of why we started to play with this idea. So I want to show you how you could build something like this based on your own calendar. So you can grab physical sticky notes just like I did. Stick them on a wall in the conference room on a whiteboard. Or you could try using a quick virtual tool. It doesn't matter what you want to do, physical or digital. I'm going to type in the web addresses for 2 tools. The first is Miro, M-I-R-O. The second is Mural, M-U-R-A-L. They are both limitless whiteboards. They're both awesome. Miro will give you 3 boards at no cost. Mural will give tax-exempt organizations a free license if you apply to them. So I like talking about them because it shouldn't cost you anything to do this yourself. Of course, a lot of other software systems now have built-in whiteboards as well. So if you have one of those already, great, use that. But what I want you to do is to take, at a minimum, your next quarter, but you could do a whole 12 months. And I want you to put the months at the top. And take the applications that you know are due. Might the deadlines change? Sure, we know that life changes, but I want you to put the deadlines that you know. So on the screen, what I'm showing you is May, June, and July as an example. And I've placed what do I know we are going to apply for in those 3 months. And then I want to think about what reports are due. Whether you're responsible for the report in its entirety or not, having those reports submitted are absolutely essential to staying a good grantee and potentially getting to apply again. So now, ideally, you take a new color sticky note and you place those on the months that you're looking at for where they are due. Following along so far? Everybody doing okay? It's a little bit of prep work for you. I get it, to take it out of your likely digital thing that's singular lines or specific calendar items, and we're putting them in sticky size, digital or physical. But I'll explain why it's so important in a minute. And then we can keep going because there's more that's probably on our plan to apply for this year. It might be some grants that we don't know when in the year we want to submit them. The grant maker said, you've got all year, submit it whenever you want. So those I'm calling a rolling deadline. I've got them represented by yet another sticky color, so I can quickly see the difference for the type of work we're doing. This is usually the spot where you stop and you ask your colleagues to take a peek. What do you think about this? Is there anything I'm missing? Anything else I should consider? It's also a great time for you to start to talk about the relative effort of the work. We're going to talk about how we will estimate this in just a moment, and I'm going to actually teach you some ideas about this. But we need to understand that a one-page application probably isn't going to take as much effort from you and or the entire organization as, say, the 75-page grant application that we saw mentioned in the public chat. They don't seem the same, do they? They seem pretty different. But on the screen right now, or in your Excel sheet, they are represented by something that looks exactly the same. So we're going to think about how we differentiate them in just a moment. The reason we want to make sure everything's here, and by everything, all we've talked about so far are grant applications. What else do I want you to have here before you finalize this plan? I'm going to assume that all of you like to have time away from the office, time away from work, that you're going to take your paid time off. I'm going to assume that there's lots of special events happening in your community, maybe some that are fundraisers for your tribal organization. And so those also happen during the course of the year and might take team capacity away from focusing on grant applications. So could you tell me in the public chat, if you got to pick 2 months when you're going to take at least a week off, maybe 2, but at least a week off, 2 months during the year, when it is your ideal time to take time off. Could you type that in the public chat for me, please? For me, I love, love, love taking time at the end of August. I'm partial to the end of August. It's my birthday, but also I love that like change in season, whether it's like back to school or back to college or like it's not quite fall. I love that time of year. So I love taking time there. So that's what I would type in the public chat, as well as in far, far upstate New York, it's kind of cold and snowy. And so I love taking vacation about mid-February for somewhere away from the snow. So those are my two ideal. So if it was my grant calendar, I would put a nice sticky on there that says PTO. And I'd put it in February and I'd put it in August. Okay, great. So some of you are telling me your ideal PTO times too. Put those on your calendar so when you are planning and also when everybody around you is thinking about the grant plan, it's visible to them. Ask your chief financial officer. Ask the person leading the program that you apply for grants for the most. Ask them the same question and put their PTO on so that you're not creating risk for them about having to do work while they're on vacation. Okay, you get the idea. We want more on there than just our grants because there are real things that take away from our capacity to get grants out the door. We don't want to hide those. Once you have this operationally laid out and you agree that everything's there, now what can happen is you can come back to this idea. You can come back to whether it's a physical one that you leave on the wall or a digital. When something unexpected happens, you can say, well, what could I move? It is much easier for us to see solutions to how are we going to navigate this unexpected big application? How are we going to handle this grant report, which we need to turn in 2 months early? We can come up with new solutions as a team faster if we can physically move sticky notes, digital, physical, like let's actually move them and test out ideas. What if we did this? What if we did that? It's not in concrete. It's not in stone. We can change it. It is more likely that we will brainstorm additional solutions through a mechanism like this. So it will help us navigate the unexpected. Now, of course, building a plan like this, it can't prevent the unexpected. Oh, how I wish it could, but it will help us handle the unexpected. Let's think about those stickies. They were all the same size. I literally was working with a team last week. It is a team of 3 individuals raising money for a very large multi-county area related to health, behavioral health. Huge, huge list of grants that they have to build and get out the door every year. And what they were faced with is the question that I asked of you earlier. Do you feel the pressure to write more? They felt it because they were directly hearing it. There was a need for them to get more grants in the healthcare space. Definitely a significant need for them to find new funders, try new funders related to behavioral health. And so they were trying to grapple with what is their maximum capacity? What is the maximum number of grants that they as a team can write in 1 year? That is not an easy formula or number for any of us to ever answer because it depends on all sorts of factors. So they were trying to think about what their plan was and if there was anything else they could consider. And so we were walking through exactly what we just did together today. We were trying to think about if we see that list, single Excel list. I mean, it was an Excel sheet. Let me tell you, I opened it up and I was like, oh, that's a long list. But in the long list, they had signing grant agreements, single list. They had state grants, single line in the list. They had a letter of inquiry that was 250 words, single item on the list. Those don't all sound the same, do they, in terms of our overall effort? They don't. Yet they were represented. So what they were thinking was, well, I have a spreadsheet that has 121 items on it. Yes, those are important. Like that's a good output to know. But some of those are going to take, I don't know, 12 minutes, maybe a little bit long. Maybe you got to talk to legal about a grant agreement. The 75-page grant application, not 12 minutes. But the question that we are often asked as grant writers, as grant professionals, is how long is this application going to take you? Could you let me know if you've ever been asked that question by a very well-intentioned colleague, friend, or family member? Why for yes, N for no. Have you ever been asked the question, how long is this application going to take you? This is an incredibly unfair question because there is so much outside of our control as the grant writer or grant professional that's going to give us an answer. And what that really is the uncertainty of who we're getting information from in terms of how fast they can reply, the externality of maybe collaborative partner organizations, the complexity of the attachments. They might not be things we already have in place. Those are all elements that make it so that our answer will always be, it really depends, right? So what many Agile teams will do is estimate their work, and they will use something that ties back to the Fibonacci sequence, which is the naturally occurring order of numbers. Some of you may have heard from like the Da Vinci Code talked a lot about the Fibonacci sequence, and the Vitruvian Man talks, that is a visual representation of the Fibonacci sequence, what we see for the natural occurring order. I love, it's pine cone season, so I'm like, that's a great representation, pick it up. You can start to see the swirl and how the growth pattern is a physical, in our real world, representation of the Fibonacci sequence. That is what we as people can see for growth. And so when we think about what happens in our grant applications, it doesn't need to be scientific. We don't need to be to the minute as it relates to our estimates, because I see the comment in the chat, and you are 100% right. One of the things that will impact how long an application ultimately takes us is how fast people are. How responsive are they to giving us the requested feedback and providing the requested review or approval? That is the uncertainty. That's one of the factors listed on the screen. So some teams dig in on actually using the Fibonacci sequence so they can have data to use in planning. Others, they think about it on a relative scale. So what I'd like to have you do is I'm going to actually teach you how to do this using the Fibonacci sequence real quick. We're going to think about these numbers. I want you to think of a letter of inquiry. And this letter of inquiry, it is pretty average for the things that you do. It is far from the big federal grant with HUD or the 75-page or the $20 million application that some of you talked about in the public chat. No. This is something that is more of a, yeah, because those big ones, right, those were like an extra, extra large project. Extra, extra, extra large project, you might even say. This letter of inquiry feels sort of like it's a medium for you. It's not the smallest thing you'll do. That might be helping get a grant agreement signed. But yeah, pretty standard, rather medium, not the tiniest, not the biggest. So I want you to think about that letter of inquiry. I want all of us to think about that letter of inquiry, please. It's going to be worth 5 points. I don't want you to tell me how much time you think it's going to take. We're not estimating in time because there's too many factors that are going to influence that. And if we're wrong on our time estimate, oh, it's going to absolutely hurt our morale, individually and as a team. And we as humans are terrible at estimating in time. We are way too optimistic. It's just not a good idea. I have many, many case studies that tell us that I'm happy to share links to about why it is a bad idea. So we're going to do this super ambiguous instead, Fibonacci sequence. We're going to use these points. We're going to say 5 points is worth our letter of inquiry. Or if we want to think in t-shirt sizes, it could be like a medium. And now, because we've all agreed on that, thank you, by the way, for agreeing to that. Now, when you look at your list of things, and you've got a whole list. I know, each of us, we all have a whole list. You've got a really large state application, not federal, state application, and there is a list of attachments. It's going to be 8 different attachments that you have to put in addition to the narrative responses and the budget, etc. Is it the same size as the letter of inquiry? Well, on your Excel sheet, it is. They're both a single row. On your calendar that you can see on your screen, yeah, it's one item. It's due that day. But are they the same? Or is there a different relative scale to the work? Well, here, you tell me. There is the list of the Fibonacci sequence on your screen. And I'm also going to type it into the public chat so that you can also choose to answer right under it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count to 3. And I'm going to ask you to type in the number if your letter of inquiry is a 5, a medium, not the smallest, not the biggest. How many points? These are your numbers that you have available. Is it smaller? Is it bigger? Which of these numbers feels like the right relative number for a large state application with 8 attachments in the budget and the narrative compared to your one-page letter of inquiry? On the count of 3, type in your number. 1, 2, 3. There's no right or wrong answer. This is about your perspective on how much bigger or smaller or exactly the same you think a state application would be compared to a one-page letter of inquiry. And what you're trying to understand is, where are the small things? Where are my really big things? How am I going to fit all this together? If we saw that we have 4 really big things due in November, and we also knew that that's when, according to Kylie, that's when Kylie wants to be on vacation. How are we going to, we've got to navigate that some way differently because we've got one of our big extra larges due there. What we're trying to find is the relative size. We're trying to think about what some of our regular medium work, where are some of the smaller things, where are some of the bigger things. They are not all equal. Ultimately, we could actually calculate and use data to look back at our recent accomplishments and use that to confirm our future plan. But at a basic level, you could ask yourself, by looking back at the last year, you could say, you know, on average, it's not just that you could say I do 2 federal grants on average a year, and I do 3 state grants on average a year, and I do 10 foundation grants a year. By Excel rows, well, that tells us one story, but what's the reality? It's more like I use, in each year, I do 2 extra larges, and I do 4 larges, and I do 10 mediums, and I do 5 smalls. All of a sudden, our sticky notes are not all the same size. They are slightly different sizes, like the picture I showed you before. The work does not take us the same amount of effort. It is not equally complex. There will certainly, yes, you're right. Then we can say, oh, so this is going to take us more time because it's a big sticky. Yes. Do we care exactly how much time? Not precisely. We just want to make sure it gets in before the deadline. But this is a visual cue for you as a team about how much involvement will you need from other people. Those small ones might not need a lot from other team members. Your colleagues might see, whoa, there's a big square on the board coming up for next month. What do we need to do? Are we started on that? How can we help? Because they can see that there's a big thing coming up on the board versus, hey, we have a deadline coming up. So asking yourself, what is your past performance? Might be another way that you can think about what is coming up. What might you consider for, is this feasible for us as a team or not? When we're thinking about increasing our velocity, increasing more applications, here are some tactical questions I want you to ask yourself. Making your work visible and showing the relative scale, showing how things are different, that in itself is a tactic. By doing that, you deepen your understanding of what is your work What does it look like? What can you really fit in? In addition to that exercise, should you choose to take that on as one of the things you want to try, here's some other ideas. If you're trying to change how many grant applications you get out the door, you can ask yourself if your team is the right size. The ideal team is 3 to 9 people. If you have fewer than 3 people, I don't mean that you have 3 grant writers. Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be amazing? That's very unlikely the case. It might be that you have someone who contributes to your team in terms of finance. You have someone who contributes to your team in terms of copy editing from the fundraising department. It might be that you have someone that contributes to your team from the programs department. I mean that they are contributing to your work, not that you have a team of 3 grant professionals. Whew, I had to clarify. You want to make sure that you've got at least 3 folks who feel committed to the work. That's one question you might ask yourself. If you don't have at least 3, get some friends, get some morning bagels, start to get some more involvement. That will help you increase your velocity of grants out the door. Also related to your team, you might say, I've got 3, but you know, it's really rare that I have someone readily available from, nothing against finance, but I'm just going to pick on them for a minute and say, I don't always feel like I've got someone readily accessible from finance, and that is often our bottleneck for applications. Okay, then your team might not be as cross-functional as you want. You might have a skill that's really important for your grant application that you want to invite to be a stronger part of the process. So it's not about changing how many applications you plan for. It might be literally about changing the engagement with one of the particular parts of your organization that would make it so that you can actually get more grant applications out the door. It's not that they're helping to write it, but their active engagement in the team would make you get more out the door. All right, this suggested tactic, this is directly related to the entire sticky note exercise. It's one thing to have your grant calendar, have it be shared with others in the organization. They can see the shared calendar, they can see the Excel sheet, they can see the Google sheet. But that is very difficult for many to see the depth of and the complexity of in the way that we just talked about seeing our year, seeing different size stickies based on the overall complexity of a particular application. So how can you make your work visible within your team and more broadly within the entire tribal organization? Don't change people, don't change anything else about what you do. Make maybe your one change, making your work more visible, and see how that impacts your velocity. We might also consider how to make our team happier. And it's not only about at deadline time, but how can we make it so that our team is happier with their role as it relates to grants? So when we talk about team happiness, according to the case studies, is a leading indicator of team performance. So if folks involved with grants are not happy with their role as it relates to grant applications, it is likely that the team will actually slow down. It is likely that the team will start to put out fewer grant applications than they have in the past. So that's why we might want to consider talking about team happiness. But first, let's talk about some of those different application sizes, shall we? I literally went apple picking this last weekend, and so I have apples of all shapes and sizes waiting to be eaten or cooked or baked with. And it's so cute when you're on the tree. Sometimes you're like, look at that tiny little apple, and then you're like, that one's gonna be great for baking. That's a wonderful one. Great. So we've got all sorts of different shapes, not just of apples, but of grant applications. And even the small ones, sometimes they're deceivingly, oh, it's going to be easy. We never use the easy word with grant applications because there's what we think will happen for how we'll get a grant out the door, and then there's what actually happens, right? Life happens. So we need to think about not just making our deadlines that are coming up visible so that people can see what's the upcoming work. We need to think about how do we interact with our colleagues? How do we facilitate our conversations? How do we facilitate for our applications? So I'm going to share some different options for maybe events, meetings. I don't know if you want to call them a meeting, you can. Nobody needs any more meetings, but some different interactions that you might choose to facilitate. You do not have to do them all. If you did them all, my goodness, you would be a scrum team, and whew, wouldn't you get a gold star for how fast you started? I'm going to give you some ideas for interactions. You might choose number 6. You might like number 2. Again, you're listening for things that sound like what you already have, and you're trying to today, in all the tactics, just find one thing you want to try. So the first thing might be that you're trying to get folks to recognize how important they are in the overall success of your grants. You might say, Diane, I heard you say team of 3 to 9. I'm a team of 1. This is a very safe space. Does anyone need to tell me that they are a team of 1? That they do not feel that there are others who are engaged in grants, that they are a team of 1? There's always at least a few every time we talk about it. It's okay. So this might be where you want to spend some time as a tactic. No pressure. But when we say grant team, we don't mean team of grant writers. We don't mean team of grant professionals. We mean the group of colleagues that have a stake in seeing grants be successful. People who help give information, people who help edit, people who help approve so they can get submitted, people who give budgets and budget justifications. We want them to, I don't care if they ever want to use the label grant team. This is the group that you rely on in order to have grants be successful. And what is important is that they recognize how critical their involvement is. Labels aren't important. We don't need to have a team t-shirt or a team slogan. I want to call them your grant team. You might want to call them your Agile team. They could just be your awesome team. Awesome group of colleagues. Maybe team makes it sound too formal. Awesome grant colleagues, also an acceptable label. But really think about the skill set that you need in order for your grants to be successful. That's who should be present in the team. It could be that what you want to do to help your colleagues understand what's coming up. Maybe you did lay out all those different sticky notes physically or digitally of your upcoming deadlines. And as you're thinking about what you want to get done in the next week or the next 2 weeks or the next 3 weeks, one of the comments was about how responsive people are when you're writing the grant. We need things from our colleagues. So we might set a plan. I want to get this draft done. I want to get this submitted. I want to get this one through edit. I want to get this one off to the collaborative partners. Oh, it sounds like a great plan, doesn't it? I mean, I think so. But my colleagues, whether they call themselves a grant team or not, I need them to agree that they're available to help with that, or that they understand why this timeline is important so that we submit ahead of the deadline. So the meeting where you talk about planning for the next short period of time, 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, no more than 4. But what you're looking for are what are the commitments that others can make? What is the capacity that they have towards getting this work done? Do you need to sit down for hours and hours and hours? No. You could stand there or meet on Zoom or on Teams and look at your digital board. But let's run this quick list that we have coming up in the next 2 weeks, and let's talk about if there's any impediments we see, who can help with what, where will you be available? Oh, you're going to be at a conference next week? Okay. Could you do this? Could you commit to this? Could we plan for this to be done this week before you're at the conference? So high level, not moving all sorts of stuff around, not creating big plans and documents and big reports. Conversations about what can our commitment be in the next short period of time. So that might be something you want to try. When we think about how long the work takes us, let's go back to those huge applications. whether we were talking about the HUD grant, the 75-pager, the 20 million. Do you remember approximately how long on the calendar it took you? Not like by hours or minutes, how long it took you, but from the day you started until the day it was submitted. Do you have a rough idea of how long those applications took? Were they done over a period of 30 days, 60 days, 6 months? If you remember and can tell us, that'd be pretty cool. Most folks are not doing the extra large applications in a period of something like 1 week. Even if you're like, actually, if I checked my time, maybe it took 42 hours. I don't know. But if there's too much back and forth with other folks and we're getting information and right, the process of the back and forth and like the wait time in grants is 45 to 60 days roughly for that big $20 million one. So we need to think about what are the steps and where do we want to have our application progress to within our larger timeline. So how much can we get done in 1 week? We're not going to write the whole thing in 1 week on the calendar from start to finish because there's too many other dependencies, too many other things we need from other people. So if we can instead think about how do I break this 45 to 60 day project? How do I break it out into, say, 1 week sprints? So sprints is a very agile language thing, but it means the consistent time box of planning for a team. So if you say, I've got this application, I've got 60 days to get it done. If I break this into all of the work weeks I have, what do I want to see ideally get done? I mean, towards the end, obviously, I want to be submitting. Ideally, I'm submitting early. I want to plan just enough to be responsible. I want to have an overall idea of how I get from A to B. If I don't think about these check-ins, where am I? How am I replanning on the next week? How is it short term? We risk this like, well, how are we doing? Are we making some progress? It's so big and so amorphous. It's really hard for others as well as ourselves to understand where we are in our progress towards done with the big thing. So breaking a big project into smaller chunks of time, a consistent period of time, is known as sprints. In fact, we have a really cool case study with my team at Agile and Nonprofits. I'll grab the link to the case studies section so you could find it. And what it is, it's the Lowell Observatory. Their consultant for their capital campaign, Alice Ferris, helped them use the sprint idea. They set 2-week sprints for a multi-year capital campaign. So multi-million, multi-year, how would they feel progress over a period of time? And what they did instead was they set a 2-week heartbeat for the project. We'll check in, we'll talk about how we're doing, we'll talk about what's next so that we can sense our progression towards the big thing. That's a multi-year example, but it's the same idea, especially when we talk about big grants. Set a cadence and a heartbeat so that the team can feel progression towards the final application. Some teams like to set a specific structure for getting feedback. Now, you may say, Diane, I'm really good at feedback. I ask for feedback. I don't always get feedback, but I'm really good at asking people, can you please review this application and provide me with your feedback? Go ahead. In the chat box for me, how many of you consistently ask for feedback, some sort of review on your grant application? Y for yes. S for sometimes. Are you asking for feedback on your application? Thought so. Chat boxes quickly. I'm getting a number of Y's. Do you always get the intended feedback and in the intended requested timeline? Right? No, you're like, that's the rub. So if the colleagues understand what type of feedback you're asking for and that the application might require different types of feedback at different times, that can be something that's helpful. I know I'm sharing the whole document with you, but I'm asking you please to provide feedback in section 2 on page 7. Or I have tagged you in the 6 comments in the margin where I would really appreciate your feedback in this particular version. We don't need to read the whole thing right now. I need your feedback in these 6 spots so we can move it forward. So thinking about how to make your request as specific and as, I'm going to say easy, as easy or as stress-free as possible for the person who really, they do want to help, but they also have their own huge list. So thinking of different, slightly more structured, slightly more nuanced ways of asking for feedback along the way. So think about how you can ask for candid feedback in different structures. Now that's thinking about how you improve the work itself, because you're getting feedback that makes the applications stronger. Along the way, you might also think about asking your team, asking those colleagues who are helping with your grant applications to reflect on how you are working together. There are some grant professionals that do this at the end of a big grant. And usually they'll call it a postmortem. The most common term I've heard in the industry for what it is. And they're reflecting on how did the big project go? But that's at the end. And that might help the next project. But what if there was a way to actually make a minor change in the midst of the current project? That'd be pretty cool. In Agile, that's called a retrospective. It's the idea that you ask the team members who are doing the work together, hey, in this last short period of time, what went well? It really helps to think about what your successes are because we want to replicate those. So if something went well, let's do that again. What can we do to make sure we get to do that again? We might talk about something that could have gone better, maybe a way we could have gotten feedback faster or different. But we probably also are going to ask ourselves if there is just one thing we could try to make us better, happier, faster as a team in this next week, or these next 2 weeks. What would it be? Different answers. It could be if we could make sure that we don't run out of coffee by the end of the week in the office kitchen. That'd actually be really cool, right? Fridays as a grant professional without coffee might not be great. Or maybe it's something like, hey, we're sending around a lot of email attachments. Could we put all the links in one place and stop emailing attachments? I think that would make it so we had less duplication of documents. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yes, let's do that. Why would we want to wait till the end of the project to have a suggestion like that? So retrospectives are something that you can hold. It doesn't have to be every week. It could be every 2 weeks in a big project, but you hold with regularity with the team who's doing the work in the project. The reason that so much of this Agile conversation is around facilitating with your team, we could take 6 awesome people and let them do their independent grant things, and we'd get some work done, get applications out the door. If we collectively set a plan, focus on our optimum ways to collaborate together, we are going to get that out the door faster and either have time to do other work or get more applications out the door. So some other techniques, tactics, things you might try that bring Agile values right into your grant team. Got some more ideas for you. We might think about that backlog. I didn't call it a backlog before, did I? I called it a grant calendar. But if you'll remember, I shared an image of a whole bunch of sticky notes earlier, and they were representing an entire year. And some of the sticky notes, they were much bigger than the rest. But you know what's funny? That big one still was oversimplified. We could tell that it was like the extra large of the work. But I wasn't really sure what components made up that big sticky. On the screen, got more colors, different things happening. This is the breakout of the big application that was on your screen. It has the different versions of the narrative drafting process laid out. That's the dark blue. It has the different iterations of both the budget, the narrative part, and the budget, the number part, the form part, in orange. All those other yellow stickies, each one represented a different required customized attachment. No small task. On your Excel sheet, it was one line. On your calendar, it was one deadline. Even in my original visualization, it was one, albeit a lot bigger, sticky. Now, wow, we can see how complex it is. When it's represented this way, when it's been broken down into its multiple parts, this was like an extra large sticky note on the board. But now, well, we've broken it down so that everything feels a little bit smaller. Now everything on the board is more a traditional medium for us, something more like that letter of inquiry. When you sum them all together, they are a huge application, but now we can see the bite-sized chunks that we're going to work on to make progress towards that big goal. So if you see something in your grant plan that is like the XXL of your work, so the far right-hand side of all these t-shirts on your screen, how can you break the work down into smaller chunks that can be visible for you and for the rest of your team? You don't have to break it down into extra small, teeny tiny little bite-sized tasks. Maybe break it into smalls, but medium might be the right size, but you want to have so that you can see the complexity of the different components and start to see things move towards done. You're trying to make your work visible, and some of you are using tools, digital tools, others that no, not using anything. One of the lowest tech, it is still tech, but one of the lowest tech ways in large applications that we found we can bring this make your work visible idea to life is by something as simple, not secret sauce, to talk about it all the time, as a project digest. And what the project digest is, it is a single document that never changes where it lives in the file structure during the course of the entire project, so that everybody involved can bookmark it or star it, whatever their structure is, but like it does not move. And everything gets linked to or added from it. So it's not about a project management tool, but everything, they just have to go to one place. If I can remember to go to this place, I don't have to say, now where was it that I had to go for budget? I know they were asking me for feedback and attachments today, but where did I see those attachments? Everything that they would ever need is here. Anyone in the entire grant team for that application can find what they need in the digest. So you, as a grant professional, you're the one helping to facilitate that, but this made large and extra large projects faster. We started getting things in even earlier than planned because we were removing impediments, reducing barriers for people getting in to give feedback, to find things, and also making clearer requests of where and when we needed feedback. But there is one other thing that happened as it relates to extra large projects that started to make it so that more could go out the door faster, people were less stressed, and that was holding, and it doesn't have to be daily, but holding what in Scrum and Agile speak is called daily scrums, daily huddles. It had previously been called daily stand-ups, although that's not as inclusive for language, so that's older language in Agile. However it happens, whether it is happening once a week, because that's the appropriate cadence, or maybe when you get closer to a deadline, it literally is every day, it is a time of 15 minutes or less. 15 minutes or less. And the point is to bring the team together, anyone and everyone that's available on the team. If someone's out sick, if somebody's in a meeting, it's okay, we still do it anyway. And asking yourself collectively, are there any impediments? Is there anything that's a barrier? Is there anything that's keeping us from getting this application in? Whatever it is that is said is the highest priority for the group to try and fix. or to ask for help in trying to fix it if they cannot fix it themselves. We found that with one client in particular, they were so stressed about doing large government grants that they were ready to say, we're just going to figure out another fundraising mechanism. We're not doing it anymore. They were so stressed. And we said, listen, we're going to meet once a week for 15 minutes during the course of this. And we might occasionally ask for like a one-on meeting over here with programs and a one-off meeting over here with finance, but like the whole group, one meeting, 15 minutes every week over the course of this project. Like 15 minutes. What are you going to do in 15 minutes? I'm like, just, will you try it? Yeah, we'll try it. All right, how's everybody doing? Do we have any impediments? Oh, yeah, and we like address one. Anybody else? Oh, okay. Sometimes you'd have 3 or 4 impediments. But then you could say, does anybody need to talk about anything? And you might be done early. Or, all right, let's talk then. We still have a few minutes left in our 15. How are we doing on our progress related to the narrative? Where are we with, and we can quick check in on our progress towards the goal, maybe using our project digest, maybe looking at our backlog of our broken down items. But the main intent of those 15 minutes was to say, related to our progress, our big goal is to submit early. Are there any impediments that are going to keep us from doing just that? The big, broad, open-ended question, you want to hear anything and everything. And that is what made it so that the average days in advance of submission climbed for that group. Their award rate climbed. They are continuing to apply for government grants. I don't think they would have if we had not figured out something. And it sounds small, and it is small, but it was a one change agreement. Try it one time, see if it helps. Part of what we're thinking about here is what makes the team happier? What makes the team stronger? What makes the grant team, however they label themselves, however you call themselves, what makes you more efficient? What makes you more effective? You've got great folks. You're experts in what you're doing. All of you that are here are great writers. So team happiness is not just like, oh my gosh, am I so happy that I get to write this grant today? It's not that type of happiness. That's cool if that's how we feel from day to day. But we need to understand what is our team's happiness with their role. It's not about happiness with the entire tribal organization, because there's way more happening in any one organization than we would ever control as a grant writer, as a grant professional. What we want to understand is how happy is a team member with their role in the team. And usually this is being asked on a 1 to 5 scale. Sometimes it's asked anonymously. Sometimes it's asked and the team has agreed that we can talk about it. We could type our numbers into the chat. Sometimes it is done in a really fun, lighthearted way. It could be done using like voting on, vote with the like pepperoni pizza dots on these pizza images and tell us how happy you are, or go ahead and vote on the ice cream by using the dots as like sprinkles. There's all sorts of fun ways, or it can be, like I said, very straightforward on a scale of 1 to 5. How happy are you? The reason that you ask is that you're going to ask repeatedly, not like every day, that's too much, but on a cadence of maybe every few weeks, you're going to check in and ask so that you can watch for trends. Because if the trend is down, unfortunately, productivity is about to follow. If the trend is flat, hey, I'm fine. Flat's okay. Flat's not bad. Things are okay. If it's going up, if happiness is trending up, productivity as a team related to grants, it might start to grow. The reason that's so important, and I've just put a link to all sorts of free Agile resources in case you want to learn more than just the retrospectives, was way more than I could give Brooke to put in the Native Learning Center resources. All of it's free. I promise there's nothing about it that's a trick. But the retrospectives toolkit might be a nice thing to start if you want to talk about happiness. The reason that it's so important is that if you are watching your team happiness, you might learn things like, I watched our happiness dip in the summer months 2 years in a row, true story, because we kept taking on new projects related to this state grant application process. And it was in the summer when everybody wanted to take time off and people had kids home from school and like, oh, maybe we shouldn't take on all sorts of new projects related to those grants in the summer. Maybe we should try to actually start working on them in the spring. If we did that, would that make us happier? And the team's like, yes, that's a great idea. Wow, how did we know? We didn't feel that unhappy, but the data, because we were collecting it over time, told us, hey, there's a dip, and then it comes back up. But why is there a dip? Sometimes in the moment, teams know why they're stressed. Too many applications, too many deadlines. But they could still actually be happy even when they're stressed, because it's not about how happy are we about writing all these applications? It's about how happy are we with our team and our role. So thinking about team happiness, also maybe talking about team stress, is a way that you can uncover process improvements that ultimately make it so you can get more grants out the door. Along the way, I love, love, love to see teams that have happiness budgets. And the reason I like to see happiness budgets, literally that yellow dingy bell here. See, I have one right underneath my monitor. Everybody on our team has one. All our clients have them. We ding them when good things happen. Not just getting grant awards, but things going in a few days before we expected, a great call with a funder, whatever it might be. You don't need a huge reason. Everybody rings the bell. They're a few bucks. So it costs a few bucks to make sure that everybody has one if maybe somebody new joins the team. That's part of the happiness budget. They're not big things. They're little things. For recognition, it might be even the postage it costs to occasionally send a handwritten note if you're not in the same spot as your colleagues. But something that's recognizing and celebrating individuals in a way that they appreciate and is maybe to their personal preferences, as a whole group when big things happen. Those are things that can help people feel recognized and valued. And yes, do contribute to our more traditional definition of team happiness, because it's a slog, right? There's like all the things that happen to get grants done, and usually the only time there's a whole bunch of normal celebration is when we get the grant award. But we want to celebrate each other in our work as grant professionals all the way along the way. Actually, that goes back to that Agile value. Individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. So how can we focus on that individuals and interactions to try and increase our team happiness while we're still doing the hard work? Now, I could talk about Agile all day. I said when we got started, to me, Agile and grants, they go perfectly together. It's like your favorite food combination. Maybe you think peanut butter and jelly. In my case, I'm like chocolate and peanut butter. Yes, I get it. That's not everybody's. But like to me, they just go together perfectly. But you probably have some questions. I'm happy to entertain any and all questions in the public chat. But also, you are welcome to email me all sorts of questions after the fact. That's always the case in any of the webinars that I do, not just this one. So you can email me any questions that you have. Just type my email into the chat in addition to having it on the screen. And as we think about what Agile might look like in your tribal organization, in your specific grant team, remember I said I wanted to know what one thing as a tactic that we tried today you might choose. If you're willing to type that in the public chat, any sort of quick shorthand about what one thing you'd like to try, I would absolutely love it if I could read that in the public chat. I'll keep an eye out for questions. I know I've shared some different links and things with you today. I don't think I remembered to put the Goodreads link. Maybe I did, but I'll drop it in there again. This is that book that first inspired me. I'm not an affiliate. I get nothing for talking about the book. It was, for me, it was the moment. It was where I went, aha. But the thing about it, and Dr. Sutherland, I'm a registered Scrum trainer through his company, so he knows I say this. I'm like, but there were no nonprofits in there. Dr. Sutherland, there were no nonprofits. There were no charities. I'm like, I know. But the coolest thing that's happening a week from Friday is that we've got our Agile and Nonprofit Summit coming up. So if you want to hear from nonprofits and charities talking about this type of work in 10-minute chunks, look, I hope it's okay. It's a free event. But I'm going to put the link in the chat, because then you could hear not just trainers and practitioners like me, but like day-to-day real world nonprofit people talking about Agile stuff. And like I said, it's totally free. But what I'm looking for in the chat, I don't see any questions I missed. What I'm looking for is, what is your one thing, your one tactic that you might try as a result of the conversation today? I would love, love, love to hear that. If you want to email it to me or put it in social media in the direct message instead, that's fine too. But I'd love to hear about what the one thing is that you decide to try. All right, I'll keep an eye on the chat box so I can learn that. But I think, Brooke, I'm going to pass it back to you unless you see any questions I missed.
Yay! Thank you so much, Diane. This was an incredible webinar. Very, very informative. I've always wondered about Scrum. I always see that term everywhere, and I didn't know what it meant, so I learned a lot listening to this. Folks, I did drop the webinar feedback survey link into the chat. I'll drop it in once again. If you don't mind taking a minute or two to do that, it is anonymous. There's no email or name attached to it. It takes about 3 minutes to complete, and it just helps us know at the Native Learning Center what is working well with the webinars and what we can try to improve upon for the future. And we do share the feedback with our instructors, so Diane will receive it as well. It helps everybody all around if y'all don't mind taking a minute to do that. There is even a spot where you can recommend future webinar topics that we can try to get for you on calendars in the future. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. This will be the first one of our next fiscal year. This will be on developing engagement plans for clean energy projects specifically. So this is like a 4-part series that's going to take place over the whole year. But this first one is going to be about frameworks for community outreach and planning. Your instructors will be Michelle Elhade and Catherine Cole, and that's going to be happening on October 2nd. Feel free to check out this as well as our other recorded webinars. We keep them on our YouTube channel in the Cathedra Webinars archive playlist. There is a link to the YouTube in the shared notes, and I'm going to put that into the chat as well. Oops. Sorry, guys. There we go. So now that's in the chat for you also. They go back about 2.5 years now. So that's a really great resource for you. You know, YouTube's free to use. So if there's ever a training topic that you're trying to explore within tribal housing or grant writing, I definitely recommend checking out our YouTube channel. There's a lot of recordings from Diane on there. And please check out our other upcoming training events. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you're a podcast fan, we have our own in-house produced podcast, the Hope a Thing, a Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or if you like to watch the interviews with our special guests, we do post those recordings on our YouTube as well. There's a Hope a Thing, a Native American podcast playlist. But otherwise, that is all we have for y'all today. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining us this afternoon. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. And thank you once again, Diane, for the incredible information. All right, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, but I am going to leave the meeting room open so that you do still have